The term Christian nationalism, it's had a bit of airtime lately. It's really a confusing term. It's like saying a religious pagan. It's either one or the other. It can't be both. I'll start with a story. It's a Bible story. There was a time when Jesus' friend Lazarus was very sick, and his sisters sent for the great healer for help. The help didn't come right away, so Lazarus died before Jesus got there. Everyone upset, except Jesus. "Let's go see him," he said. Oh, the sisters weren't so sure. They said, "Oh, he'll be stinking by now." Anyway, they went to the tomb and Jesus called out to the Lazarus, "Get out of there!" And out he comes, shuffling along as best he could, it all wrapped up like a mummy. Can you imagine it? I mean, healing is one thing, but bringing someone out of the grave when the funeral's over, all the folk have gone home, that is something else. People were amazed. Jesus demonstrating he was who he said he was. He was the sent one. Not everyone was impressed though. The religious rulers, certainly they weren't. They were alarmed, more like it. They called for a meeting to work out how they could stop this man. They said, if we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him. Let's just pause right there. Everyone will believe in him. They must have had reason to think that this was a real possibility. Otherwise, there was no need for alarm. I call this a turning point in history. It could have gone either way, meaning things could have finished up very, very differently. Now, we'll never know if their prediction, everyone will believe in him, would have turned out that way, but it's worth thinking about. So they called a meeting and they decided to stop him, to have him killed no less, and killed in a way that it looked like it was in the national interest. That's a nationalist approach, because their reasoning was, and as they stated, if everyone believed in him, the Romans will come and take away our place and our nation. Clearly choosing nationalism over Christianity, the way of death over the way of life. Jesus wasn't a nationalist. He challenged such thinking with statements like this: I predict that people will come from the east and the west, the north and the south, to sit with Abraham, Isaac and Jacob at a great banquet in the realm of heaven. Those who think the realm of God belongs to them, they'll be thrown out into the dark where they will cry tears of bitter regret. Now that's a quote from source material, and they must have been a bit uncomfortable about it because they toned it down somewhat. Nationalistic thinking, it suggests God's realm belongs to us and not them. Jesus was born to a Jewish mother and he was raised in that culture, but he was actually from another realm. My favourite historian, Alan Kreider, he coined the term resident alien, and it is very fitting. Jesus grew up and worked in Nazareth. He probably travelled with his uncle to the tin mines in Cornwall and had business dealings in other places. Jesus went with him. He was a resident and a traveller. However, his allegiance wasn't to any country, it was to the realm of his father. A father who had watched his children go wild, and he'd established a branch of the family that was supposed to do what he wanted but didn't, until finally the sent one appeared. Not a law, not a commandment, not a prophet, but a son, part of God himself, to live and to teach what living like the Father intended actually looks like, and to bring a new understanding of who God is, a Father, and who we are, children made in his image. A Father who has no favourites and children who get along with each other. Even though the religious people didn't embrace this idea, thousands of ordinary people did, particularly the Samaritans, who didn't share the Jewish passion for nationalism, and they loved the idea of God being the father of all people, not just one race. It was the opposite of nationalism. It was a new identity and a sense of belonging to humanity rather than just a tribe. But the most powerful aspect of the idea was people getting along with each other as family, and rather than creating borders and barriers, they got along together. It was a new idea, and it included a radical vision. It was actually a prophecy from centuries ago that people will get along with each other, that swords will be made into plowshares, spears into pruning hooks, and there will be no more war. Think about that. As I said, it's a radical vision. It's not unlike Eisenhower, that tired old warhorse. He was proposing a better direction for his country, reminding people in 1953 that for the price of one bomber, you could have 2 fully equipped hospitals. And for the price of one destroyer, you could build 8,000 homes. Sadly, people chose to bomb and destroy instead of heal the sick and house the homeless. His vision was for a better way, a Christ-type vision rather than a nationalist one. He'd seen the worst of war and suffering as a supreme commander in World War II. But nationalistic pride made that vision look naive and simplistic. It didn't fit the culture of individualism and avoidance of what they called socialism. Sadly, Christianity was compromised by patriotism and a culture of individual prosperity, and made to look like it was always that way. Nationalism is subtle, so subtle we're hardly aware of it. Somehow it is in our DNA to think tribally, to orient our thinking into those like us and those not like us. Nationalism is actually a corrupted sense of identity, seeing ourselves as a unique group rather than part of the human whole. The central message of the gospel is to change our mind about who we are and to see ourselves as we really are, related to each other in the best sense of the word, not strangers and not foreigners. I was hardly aware of dangers of nationalism. That was until I read a book titled Farewell to Mars. It affected me deeply. Curiously enough, a passage from Huckleberry Finn took me back to my boyhood, and it took my breath away. I challenge anybody to read the book and remain unchanged in their thinking. It was written by a man who saw 3/4 of his congregation walk out of his church when he talked about the difference between belief in Jesus and the way of Jesus. One allows for nationalistic thinking and warfare, the other doesn't. The Apostle Paul was hardly aware of his nationalistic thinking. He was raised and educated in the worst kind, that unholy mix of religion and politics, and although he experienced a miraculous conversion and a change of mind, he still revealed that Jewish chosen by God specialness. Intellectually, he embraced the Jesus message completely, penning such seminal texts as all one in Christ Jesus, no Jew, no Gentile, male or female, slave or free, and so on, but his cultural background betrayed him. There was a time when the Jewish Christians were in dire straits, poor and starving. Paul took up a collection from the people he knew in Corinth, Galatia, Macedonia, and he took the money to the folk in Jerusalem, a wonderful act of charity, except he said they were, and one translation has it, duty bound to give generously because the Jews had shared God's blessing of salvation with them. That's not charity, that's obligation. Paul's notion of Jewish specialness was still in place, Nationalistic thinking does that. We're hardly aware of it. Which brings me to the Middle East today. Perhaps the worst example of Christian nationalism on display. Good people deceived into thinking God has special, chosen or favoured people. Christians who have lost, or perhaps they never had it, the notion of God's realm belonging to all people, not just some. And this deception, it not only builds on nationalism for one's own country, but it extends it to another, Israel. I had no idea how strong it was until being associated with a group of men in the US, in the Bible Belt. In the words of one writer, 5 million Jews have successfully enlisted the support of 50 million American Christians to their cause. I'm not prepared to state the deception was orchestrated, but the link between, say, Lord Balfour, the Rothschilds, Oxford University, J.N. Darby, and a little-known political shyster who, although demonstrably unqualified, he wrote a Bible commentary that went on to rival the King James Bible in sacred status. It makes me wonder. The Schofield Study Bible was the standard text in seminaries, and its central end times theology of Jesus returning to God's chosen people in their sacred homeland, it became an article of faith. But more than that, the book promoted the idea that nations that bless Israel will be blessed, and those who don't will be cursed. This single book was able to take the promise to Abraham regarding his family and extend it to a nation thousands of centuries later. Curiously, this deception doesn't come from the most devout Jews. It comes from activists using religion to push a nationalist political agenda. Many Jews, especially of those of the diaspora, believe that the establishment of Israel by displacing the people already there was a huge mistake. Albert Einstein, for example, a Jew and no intellectual lightweight, he said, "I would much rather see reasonable agreement with the Arabs on the basis of people living together in peace rather than the creation of a Jewish state." Pity people didn't listen to him. That's Christian type thinking, certainly not nationalistic thinking. The idea of Jesus returning to a particular people, the Jews, it's fraught with difficulties. Apart from the obvious difficulty of modifying the universal nature of Jesus' mission and message for a single group, the real difficulty arises when one attempts to define who exactly are the Jews. For example, will it include people from the northern kingdom who split from the southern kingdom? Will it include the Samaritans, descendants of Abraham, but hated by the Jews? Will it include the many refugees from Eastern Europe? They became Jew-like as they joined the masses on their way to the new homeland after the war. Will it include the Sephardic Jews with their different worship practices? Or Israelis whose God is clearly not the God of their fathers? Or will it include the strict Orthodox Jews fanatically keeping the law in other countries? My guess is that Jesus hasn't read Schofield's Bible, so he won't have to sort out who is chosen and who isn't from this diverse mix of religion, culture and ethnicity. That event, when it happens, is probably beyond our imagination, but I am sure of this: it won't include a single location or a single group of people. The last time he was with the Jews, he wept over them because they ignored the things which make for peace. They were being so caught up in the things which make for war. And he was weeping, for he knew they and their city of peace was going to be destroyed in the process. Are you anti-Jew and pro-Arab? No, I'm neither. I prefer we didn't use this tribal language. It promotes division and disallows calm discussion on how both can best get along without trying to destroy each other. So what are you proposing apart from this childish pacifist prattle? Yeah, it does sound a bit like that. I guess what I'm proposing is awareness. Being aware that our culture influences us more than we realise, and that the general direction of it will run counter to the grain of God and counter to what Jesus lived and taught. And that with awareness comes choice. We can choose to accept the prevailing narratives or choose to orient ourselves differently, more other-centred than self-centred, more family than tribal. And if a single miracle by Jesus could have the learned people of the time, they saw it and had them saying the whole world would believe on him, perhaps another miracle or two will do it. But in the meantime, I'll just live as though what Jesus said about who God is, who we are, and how to get along was true and possible.